Okay, now it says, yeah.
Okay. So we're recording our premiere episode of Camden Jam. I said that right. Can you say it? Let me hear you say it.
Camden Jam.
There you go. There we go.
Hello,
So,
everybody.
so welcome. Yeah. So Camden, what were you going to say about, you had something interesting to talk about.
Yeah, when we were brainstorming ideas, I was thinking it could be interesting to talk about the feeling of being trapped when you own a practice. Um, we could talk about many things, but that's a suggestion. And I'm curious, Dan, if you had that feeling, and then your thoughts on it. And I thought it was very interesting when I sold my practice, realizing how quickly I could change things. Um, so anyways, I thought that could be an interesting topic. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think we have similar backgrounds in the sense that we both had a practice and then we decided I guess we felt trapped sort of, and then in one way or another, and then decided to free ourselves, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I did feel, I think, trapped. I think every dentistry is interesting, I think, because specifically because you put so much into it. And I guess you could say that for other types of medical professions, that you put so much into the profession in terms of learning it, um, learning the craft, practicing, continuing to learn, and you're kind of pigeonholing somewhat yourself into that one thing that you did, that it's inevitable that if you're not loving it, you're going to feel some sense of being trapped. And I definitely had that sense. I wasn't loving the physical end of doing dentistry and enjoyed seeing patients. And I even enjoyed running the practice to some extent, but definitely felt trapped in a certain way. Not that you can't get out, but it's an effort to get out. And I think more of a physical effort, it's a mental effort. I mean, you went through
Mm-hmm.
that. I know. I think I was talking to you a lot when you were going through that, and it's very hard mentally to get yourself out of that box you're put in. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've pondered many times after the fact whether um, I don't regret selling my practice, and I felt tremendous relief when I sold my practice. And at the same time, I've wondered if there could have been ways to realize that I wasn't trapped, through, I don't know, meditation, through different methods. Because, physically, I mean, I owned this practice, and so I felt like it was going to be so hard to leave. But when I did decide to sell, it was such a swift process for me. I think I had the idea in January. I approached someone a month or two later, and I sold it within a few months. So
That's that's a
within
big deal. That's a
within
quick turnaround.
yeah, within 6 months. And I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I'd been pondering yes, no, for many years, and would go through a roller coaster of feeling like things were okay, and then times where I um, just desperately wanted, I don't know, to shake it up, to change things, to not be going to the same place every day. Um,
Did you
yeah.
feel a sense of regret, or after when you made that move, or guilt?
When I sold it.
Yeah, when you were making that transition. I'm just curious. Not that I felt that. I
Yeah.
didn't feel any of that, of course.
No, I definitely did. Yes and no, I should say. I felt that I couldn't tell people that I just wanted to sell, that I couldn't say, I'm wanting to sell just because I just don't want to do this right now. I want to break. I want to do something different. So I used, if I'm honest, I think I used a bit of a story that was, I'm moving closer to family. And
That's good.
and that allowed people to sort of understand it and not question it too much. But I think the truth was somewhere in between, right? It was like I did want to move near family, but I also just wanted take a break from it. I would drive to work some days and think, I can't imagine doing this exact thing over and over for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read somewhere that most people changed careers. I don't know how many times, 4 or 5. I mean, I don't know exact number, but a lot. People change their careers a lot over their lifetime. And I, for all the reasons I mentioned before about everything we put into it, you do feel like it's really hard to like just stay in that one job for the rest of your life. And that's sort of what you're signing up for. You think you're signing up for when when you go to school to become a dentist. And these days, I mean, I was in a position where I was able, financially able to do that. But even then, I still felt guilty, to myself, to my patients. Like you shouldn't care about what other people think generally, but we all care what other people think. We have people in our lives. We care about their opinions of us and their view of you. Obviously you shouldn't, but this is the real world. And I think that weighed heavily on me for a long time. I think it took me I wish I had that. That's a great excuse, by the way. I'm going because you had it. I mean, it's true though. You had a narrative around the sale of your practice, which not everybody's going to have. Like I wasn't moving. I was staying in the same place I was staying in. I couldn't make that excuse. I kind of had a stepping stone. I had a tech startup thing I was kind of doing. So that was kind of my leap, but still, and in fact, when I left, I don't know if it was right or wrong. And, maybe there's a lesson here, but when I left, we didn't, I had a partner who's still, one of my closest friends. And it was hard, for him. I didn't, I was leaving, I'm a big part of the practice, and he didn't want to I didn't even send a letter. I was just there one day and I wasn't there the next day. And
because he didn't want to announce it, or because it was that fast?
Yeah, we didn't want to shock the practice in any way. At the time we had an associate, so it wasn't, but it wasn't like I mean, I guess there was it wasn't like it was, I decided one day I'm leaving and then I was out. I mean, there was a process behind the scenes of me, I guess, finishing up some cases, not taking on new cases, that kind of stuff. But it was not, and I don't know if it's right or wrong I'm sure there's a process of a proper way to do that. But it was awkward too, because I could see people out who I used to, my patients sometimes, and it's like you're this weirdo. You're like, where'd you go? What happened? Like people might think you're sick. People make their own.
Yeah.
If you don't have a story, people will make up their own stories, right? So it was not easy, and then more than anything, it's hard to, in my own mind, get out of that. It's an identity, I mean that. Because the profession becomes your real identity. You're the dentist or the orthodontist, or it's like so it has impact beyond just having just a job. Like if you were just working some office job, and then like think about people who are not dentists, who are just like, oh yeah, now I'm working for this other company, doing something probably not even related to what they were doing before, and you don't think twice about it. You're just like, oh, they're just in a new job. And it's just weirder for dentists, or maybe it's not, and we just think it is. I don't know.
It certainly feels weird. Yes. And has been a struggle for years. Like even still, like, do I want to do it? Do I not? And how much do I really want to lose that whole identity? It can feel really disorienting. Like all of a sudden, like, who am I if I'm not that? Right. Who am I beyond that? And trying to like rediscover that is a whole process. And I will say, although my story was a really good one, it was also very disruptive to my family because, we had a house that we had just renovated and the kids were happy in their school and we liked the town. And so it's like in the moment, I really couldn't see another way. And then in retrospect, I was like, I mean, I could have sold and stayed here for 6 months or a year and seen how that felt and then moved. It didn't have to like all occur at once. But it definitely made it easier having that narrative.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it also, it wasn't just a narrative, it was true. I mean, you did do that.
Yeah.
Right. So there was an actual process to it. You actually had a separation of not just the practice, but of your environment, right? You were able to kind of start over again, per se, in a sense.
Yeah.
But, clinically, how did you feel? Like, I feel it took me, like, I sold my, just to give you a timeline here, I sold my practice in 2015. All right. It's almost
Hmm.
10 years later. And it took me probably till now. I mean, not quite now, but like, it wasn't just a straight line. It was a very disjointed line doing different, I was doing different things besides clinical dentistry, but I still was doing clinical dentistry. I'd always kind of like find my way sort of back in it some way or another.
Hmm.
Um, and I was teaching at school. That was one way I did it, which is not a bad way, by the way, for anybody out there who likes interacting with patients, likes interacting with students, teaching, but not really having any high stakes of treatment. You're not sitting there, grinding it out every day. You get to kind of dabble with showing students how to do work, but not doing the work yourselves. But you still get that interaction with patients. It kind of gives you a little bit of your fix, if you will, your clinical fix without going hard in. So that's one way to do that. But I was helping dentists with practices and things like that a little bit with startups, and still working a little clinically here and there. So it still took a long time to get out of that mindset. I mean, it's not really, I mean, I still feel like, oh, I put all that work in. It's the skill set, all this knowledge I acquired, and all this stuff. You feel like I'm gonna, you don't want to lose it, and you don't really. Also, just so you know, like, you could go, if you do dentistry enough. Like, I've done dentistry long enough where it's like so ingrained that you can not do it for like, a month or two, and you get back, and somehow I felt like I was better.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember you saying that. I remember when I was asking you, like, I had taken that break after I sold and I was getting really stressed that I was going to lose all my clinical skills, and you telling me it's going to be okay.
yeah, well,
And it
well, it
was.
is, right? It was okay,
It's
right?
totally fine. I took 9 months off and I was like totally fine. It took me like one day and I was back at it.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe you get back to like the basics of how to do something rather than just kind of maybe doing something, in your mind. You might cut corners and do shortcuts and little things, which is good and bad, because sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes it is cutting corners and sometimes it's not. But yeah, so I think it's a process. But you should do it if you were in a position where you can move on from dentistry, and if that's what you want to do. Look, I always say, like, I wish I loved doing dentistry, as much as I see other people doing it, and the people that do, that's awesome, because we need we need you. And I wish that was the case. I had a successful practice. I could have just kept on going and pretty much not coasted, but been doing what I liked, if I liked it that much, for the rest of my career. I just didn't. So, but it's worth making some kind of move if you're not happy at doing whatever you're doing, but especially dentistry. Dentistry can be really, really tough to do
Yeah.
if you're really not into it,
And I would agree with that. I kept thinking I was going to have like a moment of regret, or I would worry about that. Like, I'm going to sell it and then suddenly I'm going to regret what I've just done. And that feeling never came. I was very happy. I'm curious what you did in your time, like immediately after selling, or for that 6 to 9 months after you sold your practice. Like, what did you do?
Yeah, I don't remember how soon I went back to actually doing. I don't know if I went like cold turkey, not doing any dentistry, or it was just like I'm trying to remember, but because it was a little while ago. But I was consistently working on that startup thing I was talking about, which was related to dentistry, but not clinical dentistry. So that kept me busy doing my thing. So I was kind of, investing time in that. I think it is important to have something to go to. I mean, it's hard. It will be hard psychologically to just drop it and just sit there
Yeah.
twiddling your thumbs, being like, okay, what do I do now? You had somewhere to go. You did. You had something to do. You were going. You were moving. You were moving your family. You had to get people settled. You had
Yeah.
a lot to do.
That's true. Yes, I had all that. And then so then it got quiet and I didn't know what to do. And I heavily pursued working at a flower farm. So I
Awesome. I didn't know
found this,
that.
I found this flower farm and I wrote the lady and said I wanted to get a job. Never heard back. Then I wrote maybe 2 more times And I'm like, look, I really want to work at your flower farm. She wrote back, you are highly overqualified. I can pay you minimum wage. And I was like, I don't even really need to get paid, but I'll take minimum wage. And so, yes, I did that for several months. I went to the farm, grounded. It was awesome. Just worked with these ladies. It was sisters that owned this farm, and they were older, and they all had other careers, like being an engineer and all these other things in their life, and they owned this farm together. So I would come really early in the morning and pick daffodils for them to sell, and it was really helpful. It made me realize that farms are a lot of work, and I don't know that I can run a farm, but it also just gave me like a space to play a little bit with like who I am and to ground myself a little. So
Yeah, I mean, and also, I guess, we came from an aspect of owning practices. There's people out there that plenty of dentists out there that don't own a practice. They just don't like being a dentist. So that's actually not a horrible situation, because you could do things like you just mentioned, I'm saying side gig, but you were exploring different things while being while still doing a little bit of dentistry on the side. Because if it's not your practice, it's kind of a perfect scenario. You can just work 3 days instead of 4 days, or pick and choose a little bit more if you're able to do that financially. And I think, well, I always thought it was funny, not, I guess it's funny and not funny, but it kind of opened my eyes to this problem, because I think we met originally through Laura, right?
I think so. I was trying to remember when it was and how. I think that, you had already sold, and maybe at that point I was still in it. I'm not sure. And I reached out to just sort of talk to you about your experience. Is that what you remember? I don't know.
I was trying to actually think about it. I couldn't remember exactly how, but which is the thing about her, which is interesting, is that I was like baffled by, she has this whole huge business helping dentists with this problem, and there's a lot of them. Like, she has like 5,000, 10,000, whatever, how many thousands of dentists that are in dentistry that are dentists that freaking hate it. That's craziness to me. That was just eye-opening to me. And it's sad. And I think it's more of a statement of maybe the state of dentistry than more the state of the dentist, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and I guess I should say to everyone, for what my experience is, I took 9 months off, and I now work part-time, 2 to 3 days a week, generally 2 at an office, and I'm still exploring what I want long-term, whether I want to increase that, decrease that, whatnot. But what has really kept me sane is when I have other things beyond dentistry that I'm doing with my life. And that has allowed me to feel more restored in dentistry, and to go in and be like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this day. I'm going to be present in this day, but I don't have to constantly be on forums learning something new, constantly be attending the next thing, just thinking about it after hours. That was what was so hard for me during practice ownership, was the feeling that I was ruminating or thinking about it later, and just losing a lot of time with my family.
Yeah. I mean,
and I don't know if you did, or what your experience was.
Yeah, but especially when you own a practice, it's like you have multiple jobs. I mean, and people, I've worked with younger dentists, and the thing I think they're pushed into that traditional mindset of, I have to own a practice. I don't mean to get off topic a little bit, but they're pushed into this notion of, I have to own a practice in order to really make it. And the truth is, like, there's a lot of dentists out there that should, like, they become a dentist, not to become necessarily a business owner. Some do, but a lot don't. And, when you own a practice, like you were talking about, it's a whole separate thing. It's not, you really do have 2 jobs, and they're both all consuming. I know that's impossible, but they are. And you can't physically, it's like you can't be giving your attention to 2 things at the same time. You really can't. And think about it. How hard would it be, or is it, to operate at your top of your game, seeing patients, providing the best care you can, while dealing with, practice issues of a business, because you're kind of like, I always say, it's like a baker who owns the bakery, and you're the one making the donuts, right? It really is like that. And obviously the trend is going toward DSOs and more corporate, and dentists are getting sucked into that, which is a whole other story we can get into at some point. But that's making things, you would think, easier, but it's actually making things harder to actually make it for them. But what'd you ask me? I forgot.
I don't know. What'd you do with your time off? Maybe that was way too many questions. Go.
Yeah. So it wasn't as, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I'm not, everybody's different. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I have to find a whole other career where I just have to go totally different direction. That's not, like, I didn't dislike dentistry that much. Well, I mean, I went back, I have a degree in public health. So that kind of sort of honed me in a different mindset, different direction, a more general direction. And it wasn't dental public health, it was just general public health. And it was more global concentrated. So I really got a feel for that. And that's kind of, I'm more entrepreneurial, more big picture thinking. And for me, it was a good way to kind of, it kind of gives me focus. I don't work in public health, but it gives me focus toward like other things I want to do with my time and my career. So I kind of have for me, it's just doing different things is how I work best. For other people, they might be like, you know what? I hate being a dentist. I want to go be a lawyer, or I want to go be a XYZ, whatever profession. And they just want a separate profession, and that's perfectly fine too. And you know what? It's really never too late. Like, I know whatever age you are, you'll be like, oh, I wish I did this when I was 10 years, 10 years younger. And you have, it's the idea of that sunk costs fallacy where you're, like, think about it.
Totally.
If you were, there's young dentists who just graduated, worked 3 years, and are like, I hate this. And they're thinking the same things we think at any point in your life. You're like, oh, I just sunk all this work and cost and money and all this stuff into it. In order to justify that, I have to stay in it. And that's wrong, right? And we all do. It's normal, logical. It seems logical, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's it's like it's basically putting, we'll call it money, but it's like putting good money after bad just because you put the previous money in. So, but I'm just saying money, but it's not really just money. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that asking yourself a question about like, what's the indirect cost of staying? So your happiness or your stress, and just considering that. And I think the other thing is just, maybe allowing yourself to experiment. That I used to look for a lot of answers from other people, like, well, Laura left and she didn't want to go back. Is that true for me? And the amount of time I spent just looking at what other people did rather than just like letting myself test it out. Like, let myself test out selling and taking some time off. I can restart. Letting myself work for someone part-time and seeing how that feels, just like honoring that by testing it, you'll figure it out, and that it's okay, that it's not, you can always go back and try again. You can always go start working with someone else. Even if you leave your associate job, like, it's going to be okay.
I think, I mean, and you can tell me if you felt the same way. I think everybody feels like this, that, I mean, they've done studies that say people fear loss or the downside more than they like the upside, right? So the fear, it can be more impactful. Like they'd rather suck it up for 20 years in a job they hate than people want certainty of some kind. And, they'd rather be certain that they're going to hate their life this much for 20 years rather than take the chance of the unknown that if they stop, they don't know if it's going to be better or worse. Right. So I think, but I guess the hardest one, the easiest one for not the easiest, but younger dentists who go through this, like, what do you think? Do you think that it's weirder for them because they just got educated and they just paid their tuition and all that kind of stuff and potentially taken on a lot of debt, and then they feel like that? Do you think that when you're younger at that stage, it makes it harder? Or do you think after you've put in all this work and labor and experience over time, like we did, and then we got out, which one do you think is harder? Or it's all relative?
I think they're both hard, but I think if you're young, if even if you didn't want to like quit, maybe you just drop a day. Maybe you just like give yourself a little bit of space, and then you really say like, what are things that I love? What are some hobbies? And you start to like put in those things and think about what you can do to balance it out, right? Because maybe dentistry is taking a lot from you. So how can you fill yourself up afterwards? And I would probably start there if I were young and feeling like that way. I know when I got out, I did have some of those feelings pretty early on, but I didn't really allow myself a lot of space for play and for other. I was so wrapped up for many years in feeling like, well, I'm not a good enough dentist yet. So I need to keep practicing that and keep learning that on my spare time. And um, I don't know. I think working with a coach or a therapist is really helpful on mindset stuff. And then just really figuring out things that you love, like whether it's yoga or art or painting, and like gifting yourself,
Did
I
you,
think.
I mean, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want, but did you, beyond the business part of getting through the process of selling your practice, did you actually talk to a coach or anybody in terms of doing that? Like, or did you just kind of like, you just dealt with it yourself?
No, I did. I worked with several coaches.
Okay.
Yes. So I worked with Laura,
Oh yeah, man.
several years though before I left, but it just sort of like gave me the seed of thinking about like other options. But I didn't have the courage to really like change anything. I think that's an interesting question though. Like, what was your turning point? Do you have, because I know what mine was, and I'm curious if you had like an event, a thought, like anything that made you just say, like, okay, I'm gonna actually go do this now.
I I think I was struggling for a while. I mean, and when I say struggling, I mean I was doing my job well. I was still into it. I think the most fun I had as a dentist was when I started my practice with my partner. It was just fun. I mean, I liked that
Yeah.
process. That just really got me energized. And, that just speaks to like, I guess I'm more
Yeah.
entrepreneurial and more creative. I like collaboration. I like creating, building something. The building part of it was fun. I think
Yeah.
once it started to be more like just being eventually. So, if you start a practice, you're building it. That's part of the process. You're building your brand, you're building your who you are as a dentist, you're building your patient experience. It's all just building, and besides the people that the team that you're building. But then eventually it's built, and it's kind of like that founder syndrome when for those founders that found these just because you're a founder doesn't mean you're an operator. So I reached
Hmm.
a point where I'm just like, I felt like, oh, now I'm just a dentist who works here, even though it's my practice, right? You just feel like I'm just part of a chain and a spoke in the wheel, and
Hmm.
that's actually the goal, right? That's really what you thought you were trying to do. But for me, I kind of lost the drive to keep on going. I guess I could have kept on growing the practice, or maybe starting another practice. That's not really my DNA. So it wasn't really
Hmm.
great. Also, it didn't necessarily fit with my partner in that element of it. So, it just felt like it was time. But it
Yeah.
was a process. It was years. It wasn't like I woke up one day and I'm just like, oh, I don't like this anymore. It was, I could see it happening.
Hmm.
And to be honest, like, my wife will tell you, because I met her when I was in dental school, and we got married actually when we were in dental school. Um, but she recalls me just being like, I don't know if I really love dentistry. Like, I was falling into this trap when I was in dental school. I was like, but you
Yeah.
don't really know, you don't really know what it's like to be a dentist. It's so different, dental school, between going to dental school and being a dentist. So I was like, I think if you ask her, she'll be like, yeah, I remember when you're in dental school, you weren't even sure you really liked doing dentistry. I don't know if I'm not really so into like the dentistry. It's more like I'm into helping
Yeah.
people, working with people, helping the patients. The help part of it, I love impacting people. I love,
Yeah.
but sitting there literally grinding it out is just like, it's just mind numbing for me. That's just
I think
me.
we're really similar in a lot
Yeah.
of those ways. Like a lot of our personality traits are very similar. Um, because when I do personality tests, it's a lot of it is like me liking variety, and like I love the startup part of the whole thing, like creating something, building something, things that are changing and moving. And I felt the same way once it got stagnant.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think knowing, I mean, what we're touching on is an important thing. I think knowing yourself, having self-awareness about your tendencies and the type of things you like, and like you said, but not specifically necessarily to like specific things, just the kind of like being creative or building something versus just and risk taking, and that kind of feeling to yourself, because you're not going to get certain things from being a dentist. And even if you're in a practice, I mean, if you're a practice owner, there are other ways. You don't necessarily have to leave dentistry. You could be like, I'm gonna just back off from clinical and just run the business. Like maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe that gives you excitement. And there's plenty of people that do that and are successful at it. But a lot of dentists out there these days are not necessarily, especially the younger ones, are not necessarily practice owners. The trend is not being an owner. So they have to be really excited about being a dentist or an orthodontist. I'm not going to play favorites. And especially orthodontist, because you're going even farther into down the education rabbit hole, right? So
I remember at my first job, I was an associate, and I ended up helping do interior design on the office space. And he said to me one day, "Man, if only you loved orthodontics as much as you loved doing this, you would be perfect." And I was so mad at him at the time.
Right.
But then, like, I reflected on it for so many years, and it was like,
you were like, maybe that was the first red flag.
But it's interesting because I will say, for me, I don't hate every day, but I will say this about personality. I'm still working on the idea that it's okay that I want variety, that allowing myself that, instead of feeling like bad about that part of my personality and feeling like, well, why am I not just okay with things the way other people are? It's a whole struggle in itself, and something to work on and to be aware, of yourself and honoring it.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our quirks, personality quirks, and tendencies. So, I mean, I think like we were saying, like being self-aware of those, and it's hard. And I don't think I was self-aware of a lot of those things early on, because if I was, I probably wouldn't have become a dentist anyway. But so it's like, I don't regret it, but I mean, it's just like we said, most people do pivot in their careers, but it just seems like a foreign concept for dentists. But
and so much pressure. I will say that, like you were saying earlier, so much. I mean, I still get that pressure from family, and if I kind of try not to talk about it with some family members, because I still get that guilt of, you should do this, and why wouldn't you, and just a lack of kind of understanding regarding things.
You know how you should respond to that? It's like,
how?
You go inside someone's mouth and work there for a week and tell me if you want to still be a dentist. People want to be in there. People just don't know. People just don't know. But it's really
go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, please. No, I don't really have thoughts.
I was gonna say, in terms of like the turning point. So I had thought about it for many years. I was thinking, I really don't know if I want to continue in my practice. But I did have like a minor health scare. Like, it was like something that was biopsied that then came back with a really weird diagnosis that could have been something bad. And I started journaling that, regardless of like what the outcome of that was, I wanted to start living my life more like I had 5 years to live, which sounds really morbid, but just in that way, like, if I only had a limited time, would I do this? Would I continue to complain, or whatever? And that really helped me to sort of like dream and think like, well, what would I want to do? And it helped me to take some steps.
No, I think that's I don't think that's morbid at all. I think that's like there's elements of like stoicism in there, like stoic thought and it's and philosophy. So it's a very interesting, I mean, I think it's great because it puts pressure on yourself to make these calls, right? You should do that. You should be like, you don't have I mean, this is talk about morbid. So this is one I've heard before where, the idea that, how long are you going to be dead for? When you die, how long are you going to be dead for? Forever. You're going to be dead forever. Well, I'm not going to get into philosophy and religion here, but you're dead forever. Let's just say you're dead forever. You're at least not like you were before forever. And so you're only here for a very limited amount of time. So you might as well make the most of it. And if you're sitting there, doing a job you hate on a daily basis, and it's not just dentistry, it's for, anybody that's lots of people out there. Majority of people supposedly don't hate what they're doing on a daily basis. You gotta try to at least make changes, because otherwise, what's the point? And when it comes to, everybody thinks they want to be rich, and it's about money, but like, the studies have shown that, like, I think under a very small amount,
like
you need a very
$75,000.
Yeah,
beyond like, $75,000, happiness doesn't increase.
That's right. Totally.
Right?
And I mean, it's sort of true. It's more about your community. It's more about the people It's more about, that's been the consensus of any of these things about happiness. It always hones down to the quality of your relationships that you have, and not just family, friends, and even coworkers. Like, that experience of being at work matters, and you could love being in the practice, but you might hate dentistry, or whatever you're doing, and you really got to make a change if that's what it's called for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're winding up this chat, but I mean, it was a good chat. So we kind of wanted to create this channel basically to, number one, have fun, and hopefully put out some good messages, some good information and education for people. It doesn't have to be for dentistry specifically, but we just like talking to each other, and we were talking a lot. We're like, you know what? I think other people could learn about these things we're talking about. So we're just going to be doing our thing. If anybody's out there and wants to hear about a specific topic, or even wants to talk to us about something, feel free to let us know. Anything else, Camden?
I second all that.
Yeah, you want to create a special sign off or anything? No?
I don't know. I don't have anything in mind. But yeah, we just wanted to create this as a space to play. Kind of what we're talking about here, like allowing experimentation in our life, play, community connection. So yeah, reach out if you have any topics that you'd like to hear about.
All right. That seems like a perfect place to end. Thanks, Camden.
Yeah, sounds good. Bye, Dan.
Bye-bye.